Okay, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about how behavioral psychology interacts with game design. So to start off, we're just going to set a couple terms in place. So the first term we're going to be mentioning is a contingency. So a contingency is a rule or set of rules that govern when rewards are given out. And then another common term is reinforcer. This is the actual reward that happens at the end of a contingency. And then a response, which is an action on the part of a player that can fulfill the previously mentioned contingency. So if you think about the loop of killing a monster, when you kill the actual monster, that's a response. The response grants you a reinforcer, which is the thing, which is a contingency. A reinforcer, which would be getting you XP, So you kill a monster, which is a response, and then you get XP, which is a reinforcer. And then after you get that XP, those two right there by themselves would actually be a contingency. Because every time for one monster, you're getting this amount of XP, and that would be considered a contingency, right? So with ratios, we're next going to be talking about ratios and intervals. These are two different kinds of schedules that we talk about, and within these two kinds of schedules, there's also two additional categories. So there's a fixed schedule, and then there's a interval schedule. So fixed schedules are fixed, as they say. They're static and they don't change. Variable schedules are ones that do change, although they don't have to change with a pattern or anything like that. They can just change, and that would make them a variable schedule, although it's probably smarter to do them in a more set way. But yeah, so hopping right in, so a fixed ratio schedule is a type of schedule where every time the player does X amount of responses, they're going to get a reward. So going back to our enemy, kill enemy, get XP thing, if I kill 5 enemies and that's for a quest, I know I'm going to get a reward at the end of that. Or if I really need a certain amount of XP, let's say each enemy gives me 10 XP and I need 50 to level up, then I know killing 5 enemies will give me a level up, right? So then there's variable schedules. So variable schedules would be like how much XP you need to level up. That varies per level, but there would probably be an average that you could use, right? So that would be an example of a variable ratio schedule. And then interval schedules are, so a fixed interval schedule is when you are given a reward after a certain amount of time, except that amount of time doesn't change. So think about if you've ever played a mobile game, there's usually daily rewards, right? Every single time, every 24 hours from when you first open the game, you're going to receive a daily reward because they want to keep you coming back. And then variable interval schedules are, as I said before, those would be like maybe in Clash of Clans, whenever you upgrade a building, right? The amount of time it takes for that building to upgrade changes per building or per upgrade. So I think that would be a variable interval schedule. So moving on to some special cases or some additional cases, there's also another thing called chain schedules, which are situations where there are multiple stages to the contingency. So if we think about Destiny, right? Destiny has exotic weapon quests where at the end you get this super cool weapon, or you get like an exotic weapon which is supposed to be really powerful, right? In between each stage of the exotic quest, you're most likely not getting the directly proportionate rewards for the amount of time you're spending on the quest. That's because when you have multiple stage quests, moving to the next stage of a quest functions as a reward in and of itself, but it's probably still smart to give a intermediary reward between each. So I think Destiny does you just get a random legendary weapon. It's not powerful or anything, but you're still getting something. And at the end, you get that really cool weapon. There's something called extinction events, which is when you stop providing the player with rewards. This can happen because of any reason. If you, for example, stop giving the player rewards when they kill orcs, like if you stop giving the player XP when they're going to kill orcs, they're not very likely to spend a lot of time doing that. However, if you have a lot of the early game dedicated to killing orcs and then like later down the line they've just forgotten entirely, if the player still crosses the path of an orc, they're very likely to kill it. They aren't willing to go out of their way, but if it's there, they'll do it. This is because whenever you set up a schedule, you're training the brain to do a certain thing and receive a reward. And then even if they don't always receive the reward, the player is more likely to do that thing if it's convenient for them. So another example of this would be, earlier I mentioned 24-hour rewards. If you stop providing the player with 24-hour rewards, they're probably still going to check the game every 24 hours and they'll like open it. They may not play it for a long time, but they're still likely to open it. So yeah. And then there's something called behavioral contrast. So behavioral contrast is, he gave an example of like a chimpanzee experiment. So a monkey was put in a room, and every time the monkey pulled a lever, they received a piece of lettuce, right? At one point, the monkey was given a grape, which they like more than lettuce, instead of lettuce, obviously. And then the next time they pulled the lever, they were given lettuce again, and they got angry, right? So this means that if you're going to give the player better rewards, you need to make it gradual and like, you need to make it gradual, right? Not only up, but you also need to make it down, more specifically down gradually. A player is more likely than not going to want to play more if they receive a randomly good item out of nowhere. But if they receive that randomly good item and then go back to their like regular loot system, it's not going to feel as rewarding to receive a common sword if you just received a super cool one, right? So that's what this is about, where you want to scale up and scale down rewards appropriately in order to maintain the player's expectations. And then something to also mention here is that reward is relative, right? Earlier I was talking about killing orcs. If orcs are a level 5 enemy and you're level 35, you're probably not going to want to kill them as much. However, when you're level 5, killing orcs seems like a huge reward because it probably takes you longer and it means more to you at that time, right? So reward is relative to not only the player's previous experiences, but also everything around them. Would they rather kill orcs, or would they rather go do something else that's going to be more rewarding to them? So then avoidance is another form of, I think this was another form of behavioral contrast, or a contingency, I suppose. This is just trying to avoid a bad thing by doing a singular thing. He used the example of an Ultima Online. Player housing needed to be revisited daily in order to prevent it from decaying. So here what we're doing is we're replacing, we still have a contingency, but our reinforcer is avoidance, avoiding something rather than gaining something. And then he talked about some ways to actually implement these in design. So I liked when he was talking about just avoiding players quitting, so I'm just going to talk about that one. So to avoid players quitting, keep motivation high. This can be done by providing multiple kinds of activities to the player, keeping the rewards consistent and relative. So multiple kinds of activities is important, especially in longer games. You wanna provide the player the opportunity to take a break from something they may not find as rewarding in that moment and go explore something else. And then you have consistent rewards being consistent and relative. As the game goes on, the quality of reward should be improving, and if all of a sudden the quality of reward goes down drastically, a player is much more likely to quit your game. This is only behavioral psychology relevant or in the scope, in the view of game design. So there's definitely a lot more here, but in terms of what you'd be concerned about, this is probably about it. The main takeaway here is you want to keep rewards consistent and relative to both the challenge and the time the player is putting in.